Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve, starring way too many incredible actors: Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, Jason Momoa, Josh Brolin, Oscar Isaac. Just too much, too many good cast. But you know what? Paid off in the end. Um, this movie is not for everybody. It is a science fiction political movie, which isn't going to be the cup of tea for most people. It worked out for me, and I ended up enjoying the movie. However, it's just not going to make people a lot of happy. They're probably going to be bored, I would say, because if you're just not engaged in the universe and what's going on in the story, um, then it's just not going to work out for you. And you're probably going to leave the movie feeling like you either wasted your time or you're going to think it was extremely boring, which would be unfortunate because this movie is a technical marvel, in my personal opinion. The direction, the effects, the acting, everything about this movie is fantastic. It's just the content of the story that isn't as digestible for the general audience as other films like Star Wars or Star Trek. Those have very digestible contents. They're, adventure series, they're fun, they're action packed, they're fast paced. There are, interesting elements in Dune that, are action packed, like the way they fight, the scenery, the creatures, and everything like that. Those are all cool and that'll entertain the general audience, but that's not the point of it. Where, like, you know, other series like I mentioned, like Star Trek, the point of Star Trek is the exploration and seeing the new things and the crazy adventures that they go on. But that's not really the point here in Dune. The point is the political intrigue that leads to those moments, instead of the series focusing on the moments themselves that are cool and action packed. They focus on the deep rooted, political and emotional uh, goings on behind the scenes that lead up to those moments. Because it's like, oh, hey, the giant sandworm that everybody knows about from Dune. That's the one thing I heard about from it, because never read the book or saw the old series from the 80s. The only thing I knew was the name, that it was critically acclaimed, and there was a giant sandworm in it. Those were the only things I knew about the series. Oh, obviously, and that it was called Dune. Um, so the sandworm is a big thing that people know about it, but like it, it it's not the point of the movie. Like, the sandworm itself is memorable, yes, but that's not the point of the entire thing. It's in there, you see it, but it's just kind of an aspect. It's a product of the rest of what's going on. It's like they come across it and have to deal with it because of all of this stuff from the political side of the story that put them in this situation, which I think was fine, at least for me. But this movie is definitely a slow burn. If you're expecting for some crazy science fiction action to happen, it's not going to happen that way. Like, they do have moments in it that are action packed, and when they do have those moments, they are really cool and they look really nice because this movie looks really good. Like I said earlier, the effects are fantastic and the direction is really good. My only gripe that I probably had with the direction of the movie is that there are some scenes that are too dark, because I feel like that was intentional, but also I feel like they could have adjusted that a little bit. There are moments in the movie that take place at night and it's pitch black darkness, but it's because there's usually like an explosion or like lights from a spaceship or something like that, something that will light up the area to give it this weird and cool looking, cinematic feel. But then you'll have, like, there are other scenes in the movie that strictly take place at night, and it's just dark and there's no lights or anything else around. It's just darkness, and I'm like, okay, it's a little bit hard to see what's going on here, especially one scene in particular. The way they fight in this series, they have this weird thing that causes this cool looking visual effect, but when it was pitch black darkness and there were a bunch of people fighting with all that visual effect, it made it just look like a dark blur on the screen. I'm just like, oh, okay, I can't really tell what's happening in this moment, but oh well. I guess that was it. It wasn't a big moment. It was just something that kind of happened briefly, so it wasn't anything that really took away from the experience. But there's not much I can really say about this movie. You're either going to like it or you're not. It's really, that's the bottom line of it. I happen to be one of the people who enjoyed the movie because I don't have a problem with the politics that were in it. They kept me interested in what was going on, but you know, this is the reason why people didn't like the prequel trilogy. I mean, granted, there's a lot more issues with the Star Wars prequel trilogy than just the politics, but like part of the reason people didn't like it is because a lot of the movie just dealt with politics, and it's just like I don't care. You know, I came there to see a fun action adventure movie, but I'm sitting here listening to Palpatine scheme about how he's gonna politically take over, and it's just who cares. So you have to be in the mindset to experience Dune, because that's the point of the movie. The point of the movie is like, okay, these people are being told to do this thing, but that interferes with this, people's goals and aspirations. So now there's conflict here, and what's going to happen between these people, and now that these people are doing this thing, how is they going to react? It's a huge political thing that is just like, because this happened, then these people feel this way, so they might do this, and so on and so forth. That's how the movie goes, and it does bring for good tension and interesting events, but it's not for everybody, because if you're not interested in this aspect, if you're not interested in the politics, then you're just going to be sitting there going, I'm so tired. I'm so bored. I want to go to sleep. Why did I go watch this movie? I could have watched, I don't know, whatever else is in the theaters right now. I think Halloween Kills is out, but I also heard that wasn't good. But anyway, um, yeah, that's pretty much doing. I don't really want to talk about spoilers because, like I said, if you like the movie, like if you see it and you like it, then you'll like it, and me spoiling it is going to kill some of your enjoyment of the movie. And if you don't like it, then me telling you the spoilers isn't really going to convince you to like it, because it's just going to be me explaining a bunch of weird space politics from a book that is now adapted into a movie. So it's not gonna be interesting. It's not gonna I could be like, oh man, this because there are cool moments that happen in it, but okay, right. There is one thing, I guess, that is an issue that I have with it, is that I'm not going to explain how these things show up. And you know what? Here, this is the one spoiler. Okay, so if you don't want to hear this one spoiler, then I don't know. I'll wave in front of the camera in like 5 or 10 seconds when I finish saying it, so that you can, listen to my closing statements of it. So essentially, the main character is capable of seeing the future, and they show a bunch of moments that would happen in the future part of Dune, and they're cool and interesting, but they don't actually happen in this movie. They're just snippets of it. So it's a little sad because it's like, oh, cool things happening, but this isn't actually the cool thing happening. You're just showing me a glimpse of it. So that was a little annoying, and that's the end of the spoiler section. So I'm waving in front. Hello, welcome back. So my closing argument, yeah, just the movie's on HBO Max. I would prefer if people saw it in theaters because I would like it to do well, because I want to see part two. But it is on HBO Max, so you can just hop on the subscription service, watch it yourself, and if you're like, I'm interested in this, then you can continue watching the movie. And if you start watching and you're like, I'm bored, I don't like this, well, then you can turn it off, unfortunately, because I would very much like this movie to do well, because I very much like to see part two, because it ends off on a cliffhanger, since the director intentionally made this movie into a part one and part two. That's how I wanted to tell the story. But part two hasn't been contracted yet, so this movie is infringent on doing well for part two to exist. And if part two doesn't exist, I'm going to be very, very upset. So yeah, that's Dune. So peace.